Hello and welcome to GBS Late Night News. My name is George Okachi. Now, teachers have vowed to stay out of classrooms until their issues are addressed by the government. The renewed call to have teachers carry on with the strike came just minutes after the Industrial Court had made a ruling on a case filed by the Teachers Service Commission seeking to have the strike declared illegal and bringing it to an end. The ruling made by Justice Lynette Ndolo stated that the teachers had the right to strike, but said any extension of the strike after today will be unlawful. She directed that the teachers report back to their respective workstations as their representatives engage with the government in a dialogue.
Speaking in Nairobi, Nathan Barasa, Kenya National Parents and Teachers Association, KNPTA chairperson, said that children deserve protection and should not be exposed to the ongoing fights between teachers and the government.
Whereas we all know that the teachers have an issue on the issue of strike or salaries, other civil servants also equally have the problem, have the same. We want them to put the interests of the children first and agree to come to negotiate. And I want also to remind the other people who are talking about asking the children to come in the streets, plus parents to demonstrate alongside with the teachers. This is quite unethical. We cannot allow it as parents of this country. We cannot use our children as shields in the war. In this matter of industrial disputes, children have nowhere. They don't have to come in the streets. They don't have to put on uniforms. And we want to remind those who are agitating that these children come in the streets to stop it.
Elimu Yetu Coalition has also called on teachers to get back to work after the Industrial Court ruled out the ongoing teachers' strike, which has affected pupils in all public schools in the country. According to Elimu Yetu Coalition, children's right to education has been violated and the government should take charge of the education system in the country by negotiating with the unions over their grievances.
We wish to remind unions that the industrial relations professional practice globally places duty on the aggrieved party to embrace dialogue through which the employer is compelled to the negotiation table with a view to addressing the grievances. When this is not the situation, we and other people in the country read malice and egoism in the motive of this prolonged dispute.
As the strike hits the second week today, Elimu Yetu Coalition has expressed their concerns over the lost school hours where children miss out on classes in what they term as supremacy battles between teachers' unions and the government.
The president should immediately seek to meet the unions as opposed to delegating, since 1 week down the line, this strategy has not worked anyway.
We want in this regard the court summons, the court rulings that have been given today to be respected. And we want to see that the unions will agree with what the court has said and call off the strikes and go back to the negotiating table and find an amicable solution on the issue of industrial action.
Agnes Maina, GBS News.
Now, before we bring you the unfoldings about the teachers' strike, now Kiambu County Governor wants to raise over 3 billion in revenue collection to bridge his county government budget deficit. He has said initially they had budgeted for 7.7 billion Kenyan shillings, but they were allocated 1.4 billion Kenyan shillings less. Kabogo says his government has had to scale down on expenditure as his team put up structures in place to collect more revenue. Kabogo was speaking a day after the deadline when county governments are expected to submit their budgets to the Commission on Revenue Allocation. He has rejected the appropriation bill at the last minute after the County Assembly reduced his office budget from 1.4 billion Kenyan shillings to 730 million Kenyan shillings.
Addressing the press in his office, the Kiambu County Governor said he won't assent to unreasonable allocations if crucial amendments are not put in place, especially for the County Assembly, for the county recurrent and development allocations, which were raised to 1.3 billion shillings from 1.2 billion shillings. Kabogo added that estimates for the Personnel Office of Clerk are in breach of the County Government Act, which stipulates that monies to that office will be set upon advice from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission.
The PMF Act allows drawing from the account through, of course, the approval of the Assembly to a certain percentage until the assent is done. So really we are within time. It's not an issue at all. As you know, even the Senate has not assented or processed the bill of distribution of revenue, and they are aware of these laws. So really we are in time. There's no need to panic.
The Kiambu governor also rejected the capital grants and transfers of 300,000 shillings for the members of the county assembly, which he said is unconstitutional, and again passed that responsibility to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission.
These are teething problems in devolved governments. This is not something that has been on in the past.
Kabogo, who spoke after meeting World Bank officials, said they would partner to improve infrastructure in the county, hinted that 1.2 billion shillings would be set aside as Women and Youth Enterprise Fund. He said the bank is majoring in improving drainage in major towns in the county, constructing roads, among other crucial engagements that will be addressed in the near future. Agnes Maina, GBS News.
Now, about the industrial action, teachers have vowed to stay out of classrooms until their issues are addressed by the government. The renewed call to have teachers carry on with the strike came just a minute after the Industrial Court had made a ruling on a case filed by the Teachers Service Commission seeking to have the strike declared illegal and bringing it to an end. The ruling made by Justice Lynette Ndolo stated that the teachers had the right to strike but said any extension of the strike after today will be unlawful. She directed that the teachers report back to their respective workstations as the government and their representatives engage in a dialogue.
Week 2 of the teachers' strike, and the strike took another direction.
Okay, there's representation from the respondents.
Petitioners and respondents are present in court to listen to a ruling to be made by Justice Lynette Ndolo, a ruling that was largely expected to have a significant effect on what direction the strike that has paralyzed learning in all public schools would take.
The petitioner and the respondent are directed to decamp from their hardline positions and proceed to the negotiating table in good faith.
But even with the teachers' representatives in court, Nat was conspicuously absent, but Justice Ndolo said she would make the ruling anyway.
I therefore find no legal basis for the argument by the petitioner that teachers may not go on strike because they are engaged in an essential service. The teachers are directed to report back to work by 8 a.m. on Tuesday, 2nd July 2013. Any strike beyond this time shall be unprotected and illegal.
Immediately after the ruling, KUPPET Secretary General Akelo Misori and National Chairman Omboko Milemba said it was still very early to comment on the matter and that the union would consult its National Governing Council on the matter.
It would be premature for us to comment on the details because we are yet to pick the judgment, and therefore we shall respond to the details of that after consulting with our lawyers and after consulting with the relevant organ of the union called the National Governing Council. As at now, I think it is very premature.
The real losers in the ongoing tug of war between the Teachers Service Commission and the different unions representing teachers are the school-going children who are just about to sit for their end-of-term examinations. And with today's ruling, we can only wait and see what deal the Teachers Service Commission and the different unions representing teachers will have come up with to present to the court on the 15th of this month.
However, minutes later, NAT called for a press conference and defied the court directive, telling its members not to return to work awaiting dialogue with the government. NAT insists it cannot negotiate anymore with the government over negotiated agreements.
Now the latest attempt is to go and hide behind the courts. This is a futile attempt. It is not going to work. We are not in politics. We are not playing political games. We are dealing with a pure labor issue, whose mathematics are very simple. Look for money, pay teachers. That is why we're not saying we are not entering into any dialogue. Dialogue for new things, yes.
As if reacting to Deputy President William Ruto's appeal that there is pressure on the young Jubilee government as they had done with the previous governments,
it is attempting to hide behind political covers by reducing a dispute to a Jubilee and code business. We want to tell them to desist. We are not victims and slaves of political groups.
The Deputy Secretary General Mudzon Zili also added that the Education Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kaimenyi should not issue threats to the teachers as they draw their salaries from the Teachers Service Commission.
For teachers of Kenya to have worked and then a certain power directs that they should not be paid is misplaced. And we want to make it very open that teachers do not draw their salaries from Kaimenyi and Kaimenyi Investments. They draw salaries from the Teachers Service Commission.
The union's national chairman Wilson Sosion says only the Secretary General of the union can call for a strike or call it off.
Under our constitution, to call a strike and to call off, no one else, no other institution can do it. A teacher strike in Kenya is only called and called off by the Secretary General. Not even the President of the Republic cannot order teachers to go back to class.
According to Justice Ndolo, the negotiation with NAT will be on the legal notice number 534 of 1997 and legal notice number 16 of 2003, while the one with KUPPET is on rationalization of the commuter, medical, leave and responsibility allowances. Eric Munene for GBS Prime.
And well, as this sizzles, in 2010, the government banned the use of fuel guzzlers for the government officials and instead settled for more moderate and less fuel consuming Volkswagen Passats. But the trend is slowly returning to where it was. Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich is tonight speaking tough on all government officers who are using high-powered engine cars that the government will at no cost accommodate such costly affair at the expense of the taxpayer.
The government's stern warning comes amid fears that some top civil servants and cabinet secretaries are driving luxurious cars of high fuel consumption capabilities. Finance Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich says it's unlawful for any government official to purchase expensive and fuel-guzzling cars for their day-to-day running of government affairs.
I also emphasize that in the next budget, we have not budgeted for new vehicles, so the current existing vehicles should be used as per the policy that is laid down. So there's no change of policy.
As Finance Minister in 2010, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, now the President, put in place a new circular on transport policy prohibiting the use of Mercedes-Benz limousines and other luxury cars and fuel guzzlers for all government officials. Cabinet ministers then were made to submit the Mercedes limousines for Volkswagen Passats of not more than 1800 cc. But now the policy seems to be overridden by the same government officers under his administration.
The transport policy that is still there is still in place. We have not changed anything. The policy that was introduced about 3 years ago or so is for capping this to 2000 cc and maybe for 3000 cc's are diesel powered vehicles.
The move was largely intended to reduce expenditure by the government. On this note, Rotich says his ministry will be keenly watching on how the county and national governments utilize public money, especially in reference to priorities in the new budgets. The man in charge of the country's finance docket, Henry Rotich, has warned top government officials, more so cabinet secretaries, of using and or even buying high-powered engine cars for their operations. Further, Mr. Rotich has maintained that the 2010 circular on transport policy remains in force. Samuel Tarish reporting for GBS News at Treasury Building, Nairobi.
Now, speaking about money matters, in the past, the country has been ranked poorly in expenditure of donor funds, more so when it comes to HIV. However, owing to an improvement in the management of these funds, Global Fund has granted the National Treasury $27 million. The kitty will be used in curbing HIV and AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis.
The National Treasury has today received a financial boost of $27 million with no conditions attached from the Global Fund. The grant will go a long way in facilitating the fight against 3 diseases which continue to deprive Kenyans of their lives as well as health.
Of course, the government of Kenya continue to prioritize the health sector, and we continue to provide resources to support the health sector. In particular, we are going to scale up our support for funding for HIV activities in Kenya, just to really ensure sustainability in future, rather than relying heavily on the support from global funds. So we will do our best to ensure that we continue with that support.
A few years back, we could not even say that, because 93% to 95% of the whole resources which were invested on HIV/AIDS were coming from outside. Today, I can say in less than 3-4 years, Kenya has been almost tripled the resources coming from the domestic side. So that is very important, moving from $70,000 per year to almost 200 million. I said $70 million per year to $200 million is a huge scale up. And we are...
This being the 10th round of the kitty, it will act as the last round, since from 2014, Global Fund will change its strategy of releasing the funds.
What I mentioned that was due to some of the governance issues we had, but now we've managed to turn around, and we are now doing quite well. We have reformed how it is being done through single arrangement for funding through for each of the areas of support: HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. And
the kitty comes at a time when the prevalence of these diseases is said to have decreased with a big margin. New methods of testing tuberculosis are also set to be introduced.
With multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, which is becoming a growing problem, and again very much linked to HIV, and will support the purchase of machines that can now detect drug resistance within a month rather than waiting the 2 to 3 months it took before. So that will then help not only with the case detection but also fighting multi-drug resistant tuberculosis.
Henry Maina, GBS News.
As your Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, together with the two principal secretaries in the ministry, today toured Jomo Kenyatta International Airport to familiarize themselves with the operations ongoing at the airport and review ways of improving efficiency without necessarily making investment. The airport is currently in the process of expansion in terms of terminals and parking bays.
The process of cargo clearing at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport has been a big headache to many due to the long period of time it takes. But this may soon change, according to Transport and Infrastructure Cabinet Secretary, who says measures are being put in place to improve the cargo handling at the airport.
On average, it takes 4 days to get goods consignment from the airport. So if your goods arrive on Monday, most likely you get them on Friday afternoon or the week after, which is unacceptable.
The Greenfield Terminal construction, which has been delayed, is set to commence early next year and is expected to be completed in 36 months' time.
The Greenfield Terminal, the impediment is not money, there is money. KAA had 16 billion, 8 billion last year. The year that ended yesterday, they have budgeted another 8 billion, so resources are not a problem.
A fourth terminal unit is at its final process of construction amidst many obstacles that the Cabinet Secretary says was caused by poor consultation and implementation. Expansion of parking bay is also under construction, a process that will cost 4 billion shillings, including the construction of the fourth terminal unit. Parking space at the airport is currently one of the biggest headaches. Some planes have to be parked in the neighboring countries, meaning extra cost for the company.
And because of that, because of the fact that the parking space is limited for aeroplanes, not for cars, for aeroplanes, we are then forced to get the aeroplanes out of here into those airports that are not far away from here. So we go to Dar es Salaam, we park in Kisumu, we park in Entebbe and Mombasa. But there is a parking fee that we pay to those airports. So in fact, we are taking revenue away from here to other airports.
Namkabo Werunga, GBS News.
And now just across the borders, at least 29 people died in Ugandan capital Kampala's fuel tanker explosion when the tanker crashed into a car. The fuel tanker fire left at least 20 others injured. According to the police, most of those who died were motorcyclists who had rushed to the scene to siphon fuel from the tanker.
One of the Ugandan newspapers reported that the fuel spilled all over the tarmac and into the drainage channel. At least 29 people were killed and more than 20 are said to be critically ill in hospital. Several bodies were found in a nearby papyrus swamp as victims tried to extinguish the flames by jumping into the water. Like in many cases in Kenya, most of the victims had rushed to siphon off the fuel. The Ugandan Minister for Disaster Preparedness described the incident as an avoidable calamity, saying it was unfortunate that some people had failed to learn from past mistakes. In 2001, a similar accident happened on a highway from Kampala to the western region, leaving nearly 40 people burned beyond recognition. Kampala is a key transit point for tankers taking fuel to landlocked Rwanda, Burundi and Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Josephine Wawera, GBS.
As were thousands of people massed in Tahrir Square and outside the presidential palace in Cairo, the biggest demonstration in Egypt since the 2011 revolution that ousted President Hosni Mubarak. The protest that has taken place through the night with some outbreaks of violence in Egypt is calling for the resignation of the Egyptian president.
Hundreds of thousands of opponents of Egypt's Islamist president poured out onto the street in Cairo and across much of the nation, launching a push to force Mohamed Morsi from office a year later after taking an oath. Fears of violence were high, with Morsi supporters vowing to defend him. Millions of protesters across the country accused the country's first Islamist president of failing to tackle economic and security problems since taking power a year ago. The demonstrations, which started peacefully, turned chaotic after some supporters threw stones and petrol bombs at the Cairo's headquarters of Muslim Brotherhood. At least one person was killed when shooting broke out near the political office. Meanwhile, thousands of Morsi supporters staged a rally in the Cairo suburb city of Niles. A presidential spokesman later urged the protesters to respect the democratic process, referring to Morsi's victory in last year's elections, which were widely seen as free and fair. Many of Egyptians feel betrayed by the president, who they say lacked interest in uniting Egyptians. The demonstration are the culmination of division and instability that have been building since Morsi took office in June 30, 2012 as Egypt's first freely elected leader. During Morsi time, Egypt's already sour economy has dropped further as investors pulled out of the country and tourism has dropped with persistent lawlessness and crime. Meanwhile, President Morsi insists he's not stepping down. The last time such numbers were seen on the square in Cairo was during the revolution in 2011, which saw the ousting of President Hosni Mubarak from power. Antonin Anyango, GBS News.
And now hitherto, the Egyptian military has called upon the government to heed to the plights of the protesters before they wade into the issue. Now, away from that, to GBS Sports News now. In Indeed, a very warm welcome. Now, the Tusker Premier League transfer window closed on Sunday as AFC Leopards and defending champions Tusker FC spent heavy on their transfer targets, while newcomers Kakamega Homeboys, Muhoroni Youth and Bandari were busy in the market. In the meantime, the Kenya Sevens rugby team is expected in the country after finishing fourth in the Rugby World Cup that concluded in Moscow as New Zealand were declared the World Cup champions after pipping England in the finals.
Cracking try scored by Tafadzua Chitokwindo.
The national sevens rugby team under the stewardship of head coach Mike Friday finished fourth in the just concluded Rugby World Cup in Russia. The team suffered a 29-5 defeat to Fiji in the third place playoff after a 12-5 loss to England in the main cup semi-finals. It was an impressive performance for the Kenyan team in its second World Cup appearance since the 2009 campaign. Kenya began the championship on a high note, having defeated Philippines, Zimbabwe and Samoa in both teams' Group C matches.
To break loose, Kayenge goes over for the first try of the second half.
Kenya had luck in the main cup quarterfinals against a hard-fighting France before emerging victorious in extra time. However, the dream of playing in the final was ended by England in a father and son affair before the Britons were handed a 33-0 defeat by a dominant New Zealand, who remained unbeaten in the event. Canada surprised Samoa by claiming the plate trophy for the first time ever, following the 19-12 win.
The defence flipped on by Saleh.
In the meantime, the Kenya Premier League transfer window came to an end on Sunday as Muhoroni Youth, spending their second season in the top flight, Bandari and newcomers Kakamega Homeboys were busy in the market. Muhoroni Youth signed a record 16 players, including National League club agrochemical superstar Jeremiah Wanjala. Basement club Kakamega Homeboys signed 13 players, while Bandari recruited 11 players, as defending champions Tusker and Karturi Sports had 10 players on its transfer list. Paul Odhiambo and Eric Ocheng are among the 10 players to have joined Gor Mahia in the transfer window, same as 2008 Kenya Premier League champions Mathare United, who spent to bring back former player Osborne Monday from Sofapaka. AFC Leopards spent big in the transfer market as they brought on board midfielder Peter Opio from Tusker and Abdallah Juma from Sofapaka. Sony Sugar signed 8 players after offloading 7 in the transfer window. Sofapaka has 6, Western Stima 5, 4 at Chemilil Sugar, while City Stars and Kenya Commercial Bank added 3 players only. Ugandan international Danwa Galuka has a pending transfer move to AFC Leopards. Patrick Oboya is set to join Kogalo, while Batambuza Shafik will complete his move to Western Stima from Uganda Sports Villa Club. Mbaka Collins, GBS Sports.
And now still on the Tusker Premier League, Thika United still remains at the helm of the Tusker Premier League standings even after a flattering 1-1 draw against AFC Leopards at Nyayo National Stadium today. Noah Fuller put the Leopards in the front in the first half before the league leaders equalized in the second half. Ken Juguna has more on that.
Noah Wafula scored the opening goal for AFC Leopards in the 4th minute during the first half, putting the Ingwe ahead. The match that was tightly contested by the two opponents, with each team having its attempt to outdo each other, saw Dennis Odhiambo equalize for league leaders in the second half to keep them at the summit. Despite the various attempts from both teams, the match ended on a 1-1 draw. Coach John Kamau of Thika United expressed disappointment about the outcome as Luke Emael beamed with optimism for better performance in future outings.
Basically, I can't say that I'm disappointed because, the kind of draws that I'm picking, if you look at the draw like Gor Mahia, AFC, these are teams that are also aiming to come on top of the league. So basically, I'm one contented person.
We created a lot of good chances with good combinations, but the second half it was not so well as football, not the football that I like in second half.
Ken Juguna, GBS Sports.
Now to the Confederations Cup. The FIFA Confederations Cup final was played last night, with host Brazil scoring thrice past the European and world champion Spain to lift the trophy. Fred scored a brace as Neymar was awarded the Bronze Boot award, scoring once. The champions will be looking forward to replicate the same performance as they host the World Cup in the next year.
Playing in their fourth consecutive FIFA Confederations Cup and having the support of the home crowd, Brazil went on to score very early in the game, with Fred lifting past Spain's goalkeeper Iker Casillas in 1.5 minutes after kickoff.
And they turn it home! And Brazil lead in next... And Fred turned it home.
Spain almost equalized in the 40th minute after Pedro successfully beat the goalkeeper, but Brazil's defender David Luiz cleared the ball on the line.
Piece of defending.
In the 45th minute, Neymar scored the second with a brilliant shot on top mid of the net.
Wow! At the home of stellar football, there is a goal to set amongst...
Fred added the third goal and his second of the match to hand his side the victory.
It's Fred again!
The win ended the European and world champions' 3 years of unbeaten record, totaling to 29 matches in victory. Luis Felipe Scolari's men showed total class even as they prepare to host next year's World Cup final that Spain will be defending. Florence Ndongo, GBS News.
Well, and that's it for GBS Sports News. Thank you for watching. Well, before we wind up, let's have a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And that's it for GBS Late Night News. Thank you for watching. My name is Jojo Kachi. God bless you. See you again tomorrow.